My fiancé ditched me right before we were supposed to get married, leaving me completely shattered and desperate. With no other options, I took a job as a live-in nurse for a billionaire who was paralyzed. But on my very first night, what I saw left me standing there, frozen in utter shock. I pulled up to Julian's mother's house, thinking I was there to finalize the seating charts for the wedding. But when the door opened, it wasn't his mother who greeted me. It was Isabel Davenport, and she was wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace, the very one Julian had claimed was stolen last month. Over her shoulder, I could see my wedding invitations, the ones I'd spent weeks addressing, scattered on the coffee table. My name had a thick red line drawn through it, and hers was scrawled above it. "Alina," she said, her smile as sharp and predatory as a shark's. Julian thought it would be better if I was the one to explain things to you. That pearl necklace was my only inheritance, the single piece of value my grandmother had managed to leave me before cancer stole her from my life when I was just 12. Julian knew the whole story. He had held me as I sobbed over its loss. He'd even gone with me to file a police report for the supposed robbery. And now, there it was, resting against Isabel Davenport's collarbone as if it were made for her, catching the light from the massive crystal chandelier in his mother's grand foyer. Where is Julian? My voice was surprisingly steady, a stark contrast to my hands, which I had to press firmly against my purse to keep from shaking. "He's upstairs with Mother Vance, going over the prenuptial agreement," she said, a smugness coloring her tone. "Well, our prenuptial agreement—" Isabel then stepped aside, waving me in as if she were already the mistress of every home tied to Julian's family. "Come in. We have a lot to talk about." The living room, which I had helped redecorate for Christmas just last year, still had the throw pillows I had picked out, but everything else in the space felt foreign, hostile. Julian's mother, Catherine, was seated in her usual wingback chair, sipping tea from a china set she had once told me was too precious for me to ever handle. Next to her sat Richard Davenport himself, the pharmaceutical mogul whose enormous donations propped up half the city's medical institutions. "Alina," Catherine said, not bothering to stand, her voice lacking even the thin veneer of warmth she'd barely managed to fake during our entire 4-year relationship. "This is for the best. Surely you can see that. We were just 3 weeks away from the wedding." 3 weeks, and they had assembled here like a firing squad to inform me I'd been replaced. The invitations I had personally handwritten, because Catherine had insisted it demonstrated proper etiquette, were laid out on the coffee table Isabel had already crossed out Alina Rose Petrov, and in a vicious red ink written Isabel Marie Davenport above it. Julian and I have been collaborating closely on the Davenport Medical Technology Initiative, Isabel explained, sinking into the sofa where I had endured countless Sunday dinners, desperately trying to win Catherine's approval. Our partnership just evolved. "These things happen. These things happen?" I echoed, my voice finally fracturing. "We have a home together. We have a reception hall booked. We have a life." Had Julian's voice cut in from the stairway. He descended the steps with a calculated slowness, a manila folder tucked under his arm that I recognized as the same kind he used for patient files. Even now, just weeks before what was supposed to be our wedding, he was wearing the expensive Tom Ford suit I had bought him to celebrate his promotion to attending surgeon. He looked exactly like the man I had fallen in love with, but his eyes were different. They were cold, clinical, in a way I had never seen before, not even when he'd lost a patient on the operating table. "Everything has been handled," he stated, placing the folder on the coffee table next to our defaced invitations. "The apartment lease will be transferred solely to my name next week. Your things will be professionally packed and moved into a storage unit. The wedding venue has been informed, although we're keeping the date for other purposes." Other purposes? They were keeping our wedding date for their wedding. The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow, and I had to clutch the doorframe to keep myself from collapsing. "The ring," Catherine added, her gaze fixed on my left hand where Julian's grandmother's heirloom diamond glittered in the afternoon sun. "It needs to stay in the family." My fingers reflexively closed over the ring, this symbol of a future that had just been stolen from me. But Julian was already holding out his hand, his patience that of someone who knows they've already won Alina. "Please don't make this any more difficult than it needs to be," he said, using the same calm, patronizing tone he used with uncooperative patience. Our relationship has run its course. Isabel and I share professional ambitions, family ties, and a vision for the future that simply aligns more effectively. When? The word slipped out before I could stop myself. "When did you decide this?" Isabel let out a laugh, a tinkling sound like shattering glass. "Oh, darling, these things aren't really decided. They just become obvious. But if you need a date, Julian and I started collaborating on the neural interface project about 2 months ago. 2 months. My mind raced back through all the late nights Julian had claimed were emergency surgeries, the weekend conferences that had suddenly become mandatory, the unexplained charges on our joint credit card for 5-star restaurants I'd never set foot in. The signs had all been there, written in a language of deceit I had been too naive, too trusting to comprehend. "Your routines were always so predictable," Julian said, his clinical assessment of our life together cutting deeper than any knife wake-up at 5:30 a.m., breakfast at 6, the same rotation of oatmeal or eggs, the same talk about hospital gossip, the same everything. With hands that felt like they belonged to a stranger, I slid the ring off my finger. Someone who could stand in a room full of people who had orchestrated her total humiliation and not break down screaming. The diamond made a small, sharp click as I placed it on Catherine's mahogany side table, next to her teacup that cost more than my entire monthly salary. "The key to the storage unit will be messengered to Mrs. Gable's address," Julian continued, checking his phone as if I were just an item on his daily schedule to be ticked off. "I assumed you'd go there. You always do when things get overwhelming." Mrs. Gable. My foster mother, the only real family I'd ever known, reduced to a predictable data point in Julian's cold calculations. He had mapped out my utter destruction, right down to the very place I would run for safety. "Is there anything else?" I asked, my voice somehow still steady. Richard Davenport finally stood up, adjusting the lapels of his Italian suit. "There is the matter of discretion. The medical community is a small world, and we would all prefer this transition to be managed without any unnecessary theatrics. A clean break is in everyone's best interest, especially your daughter's reputation," I said, looking directly at Isabel. "Taking another woman's fiancé 3 weeks before the wedding might lead people to ask questions about her character." Isabel's shark-like smile widened. "Oh, Alina, no one is taking anyone. People just find their way to where they belong. Julian belongs in a different circle now. Surely even you can appreciate that." The cruelty was so precise, so surgical. They hadn't just gathered to end my relationship. They were here to methodically dismantle my sense of self-worth, to ensure I understood I had no place in their world. The pearl necklace at Isabel's throat seemed to mock me, a symbol of my grandmother's dreams, strangled by those wealthy enough to steal them. "The hospital schedule has been rearranged," Julian added, ever the logistician. "You won't be assigned to my surgical floor anymore. Dr. Harrison has agreed to move you to the night rotation in the pediatric wing. Less chance of awkwardness." They had thought of it all. My home, my work, my finances, my dignity. All of it carefully excised from Julian's life like a malignant tumor. I stood there in Catherine Vance's opulent living room, surrounded by the architects of my ruin, who had planned my removal with the same meticulous detail I had poured into planning the wedding that would now celebrate their victory. "If that's all," I said, turning toward the door with what little was left of my spine. "One more thing," Isabel called out, her fingers toying with my grandmother's pearls. "These really are lovely. Julian has such impeccable taste." The heavy front door closed behind me with a soft, final click. It was the sound of my entire world ending. 3 weeks before my wedding, I stood on Catherine Vance's perfectly manicured porch with no ring, no home, no fiancé, and no idea that this public execution was, in fact, the first step toward my liberation. The drive from Catherine Vance's mansion was a blur. My hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles were white. 20 minutes. 20 minutes to get to the apartment Julian and I had shared for 2 years, and 20 minutes to try and process that my life had just been surgically removed while I was still standing. The fluorescent lights of the parking garage flickered over my car as I pulled into my designated spot, right beside the empty space where Julian's BMW should have been. Of course, he wasn't home. He was probably at Isabel's penthouse, celebrating his clean disposal of me with champagne that cost more than my student loan payment. The apartment door opened to a familiar darkness, the scent of Julian's cologne hanging in the air like a ghost. I hit the light switch and found him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows we'd chosen together, still in his scrubs from his morning shift. He didn't turn as I walked in, just kept staring out at the sprawling city lights, as if they held the answers to questions he had never bothered to ask me. "We need to talk," he said to the window, and those 4 words, which I already knew were coming, still made my legs feel weak. The scene at his mother's house was just the opening act. This was the grand finale. "I think your mother and Isabel covered everything quite thoroughly," I managed, placing my purse on the console table right next to our framed engagement photo. Julian finally turned to face me. His expression was the same detached mask he wore when delivering a terminal diagnosis. No emotion, just cold, hard facts. "They shouldn't have done it like that. I wanted to handle this myself. How thoughtful of you." The sarcasm felt like a thin layer of armor, but it was all I had. He pulled a thick manila envelope from his laptop bag. Julian documented everything, his life a series of paper trails proving his own efficiency. "I've arranged all the logistics. The lease transfers to my name next week. Your name was removed from our joint accounts this morning. The caterer, photographer, and venue were all canceled 48 hours ago." 48 hours. While I was painstakingly writing out place cards, practicing my new signature, Alina Vance, he was already erasing me. "A moving company will arrive tomorrow at noon," he continued, sliding the envelope across the dining table where we had hosted dinner parties, where I had quizzed him for his medical boards, where we'd planned a future over cheap wine and takeout. "Everything will be professionally packed and put into storage. I've paid for the first month." How generous. My voice sounded hollow. "Distant Isabel and I share something you and I never could," he said. And for the first time, a flicker of emotion entered his voice. Not remorse, but a raw, unsettling excitement. "Her father's influence will fast-track my career in ways that would have taken decades. The department chair position is practically a guarantee by the time I'm 35. The Davenport Medical Initiative is going to change spinal surgery. This is bigger than us, Alina. It's bigger than personal feelings." "Our wedding is in 3 weeks," I said, the words automatic, useless. "Was," he corrected, "and that date is being repurposed." The venue was too perfect to let go to waste. The sheer, calculated cruelty of his efficiency was breathtaking. He had simply transferred our wedding to Isabel like a dinner reservation. "I need the ring back," he said, gesturing to my now bare finger. "You already gave it to your mother." "The one you were wearing." The original setting. I had switched them after the meeting at his mother's, a tiny, futile act of defiance. But Julian knew me, anticipated even my smallest rebellions. My fingers fumbled with the platinum band, shaking so badly I dropped it. It clattered on the granite countertop with a sound like a gavel. I placed it carefully beside the envelope, fighting the urge to hurl it at his perfectly composed face. "Thank you for your clarity," I said, the words scraping my throat. He pocketed the ring with an automatic gesture. already dismissing its meaning. He actually checked his watch, as if I were making him late. I have evening rounds. I suggest you pack efficiently. The movers are on a tight schedule. The door clicks shut, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the apartment. Our apartment. My apartment. For only 6 more days, I stood there, frozen for what felt like hours. Then, moving like an automaton, I walked to our bedroom and began the painful archaeology of our shared life. Every drawer I opened revealed another layer of his betrayal. Receipts from a high-end restaurant where we were supposed to have our rehearsal dinner, but dated weeks ago, for a table of 2, a promotional pen from Davenport Pharmaceuticals tucked away in his sock drawer. Isabel's business card, the corners softened from being handled, used as a bookmark in his medical journal in the closet. My wedding dress hung like a pristine ivory accusation. A Vera Wang, a small fortune I had justified with the phrase, "You only get married once." The tags were still on it, the receipt solely in my name. I understood now. He'd made sure the debt would be mine alone. I pulled down suitcases and began folding my life into neat, manageable squares. Each item was a memory, a piece of shrapnel. The blue dress I wore to his white coat ceremony, the fleece pajamas he'd bought me when I first moved in, the jewelry box containing the pearl earrings he'd given me for Christmas, claiming they were new, but which I now realized were likely a hand-me-down from Isabel by the door. I found a stack of moving boxes, pre-labeled in Catherine's perfect looping cursive. Alina, kitchen. Tandia, Alina, personal effects. Alina, miscellaneous. They had prepared for my eviction weeks, maybe months ago, reducing 4 years of a life together into categories for efficient disposal. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop to face the financial wreckage. My checking account held $247.83. The non-refundable deposits for the wedding, venue, photographer, flowers, totaled over $15,000, all on contracts Julian had urged me to sign quickly. My credit cards were maxed out. My old apartment had been leased weeks ago. Every financial decision we'd made had been orchestrated to leave me destitute. I was sitting on the lobby floor of our building at 3 a.m., surrounded by boxes that felt like evidence from a crime scene, scrolling through apartment listings that all required a credit check and first and last month's rent I didn't have. Then I saw Mrs. Gable's name in my recent calls. My thumb hovered over it, shame warring with desperation. She answered on the second ring. Alina? Honey, what's wrong? The sob that tore from my throat told her everything. Can I come over? I'm already putting the kettle on, she said. Mrs. Gable's townhouse was on a quiet, tree-lined street, a relic from a time when neighbors knew each other. She opened the door before I could even knock, wearing the same worn flannel nightgown she'd had on the night she first took me in as a foster kid 15 years ago. Without a word, she helped me carry my boxes into her spare room, the one with the faded Noah's Ark wallpaper that had seen a long line of broken children before me. It smelled of lavender and old books, just as I remembered. A new quilt was folded on the bed, and on the nightstand was a framed photo of me at my nursing school graduation, Mrs. Gable beaming beside me. She had made a space for me before I even knew I would need it. Tea first, talk later, she said, leading me to her cozy kitchen. She handed me the chipped blue mug that had been mine since I was 13. The chamomile tea tasted like safety. Julian left me for Isabel Davenport, I said, the words dropping like stones. The wedding is off? I have nowhere else to go? Mrs. Gable didn't offer platitudes. She just opened her arms and I collapsed into them, sobbing into her shoulder as she rocked me with the practiced ease of a woman who had mended countless broken hearts. I noticed my favorite strawberry yogurt in her fridge and a new purple toothbrush in the bathroom. She had been preparing for my return, a prophecy she had hoped would never come true. Stay as long as you need, she whispered. This has always been your home. For 3 days, I existed in a fog of grief. Mrs. Gable brought me soup and sat with me in silence as I scrolled through job listings, my savings not even enough for a security deposit. The hospital had already moved me to the night shift, just as Julian had arranged. On the third evening, Mrs. Gable came in with a folder. My cousin Marjorie called from Sterling Placement. There's a job that's been open for months. It's unusual. She placed the folder on the bed. The compensation package made my eyes widen. $15,000 a month, plus room and board. It was more than triple my salary. "What's the catch?" I asked. "The patient is Elias Thorne," she said, her expression cautious. "The tech billionaire. The skiing accident 8 months ago. He's paralyzed and he's..." Difficult 4 nurses have quit in the last 2 months. One of them only lasted 3 days. I knew the name. Elias Thorne, the prodigy who built a medical tech empire before he was 35. "They say he's impossible," she continued, prone to fits of rage, completely isolated in that mansion of his in the Westfield Heights. But Alina, the money, 6 months there, and you could start over anywhere you wanted running away. That's what it was. But staying meant watching Julian and Isabel's rise from the shadows. It meant accepting my demotion, my exile. I picked up the folder and dialed the number before I could change my mind. The interview was the next morning. The agency's office was all glass and steel, exuding cold, old money. Margaret Harrison, the estate manager, matched the decor. Steel gray hair, charcoal suit, and an expression that gave nothing away. "Miss Petrov," she said, gesturing to a chair. "I've reviewed your file. Excellent references. Tell me why you want this position." "I need to disappear," I said, the honesty surprising even me. "My life here has become untenable." She studied me. "Personal crisis, financial trouble. My fiancé left me for Isabel Davenport 3 weeks before our wedding. I have no home, no money, and no desire to stay in the same city as them." A flicker of something crossed her face. "The Davenports. Do you have any ongoing ties to that family? Only that they orchestrated the destruction of my life." She was quiet for a long moment, then slid a contract across the desk. "Mr. Thorne requires absolute discretion. No visitors, no personal calls on duty, no discussing his condition with anyone ever. He is brilliant, bitter, and will test every limit you have. He doesn't tolerate pity, sentiment, or weakness. Can you handle that?" I thought of Julian's clinical dissection of our life, Catherine's labeled boxes, Isabel wearing my grandmother's pearls. I can handle anything that isn't the life I just lost. "Sign here." I signed without reading the fine print. The next morning, a black town car arrived. Mrs. Gable hugged me goodbye. "You're stronger than you know," she whispered. The drive to Westfield Heights was like entering another world, where houses became estates behind imposing gates. The Thorne estate was a fortress of glass and steel, rejecting the natural landscape around it. Margaret met me at the entrance. "Your suite is in the east wing," she said, leading me down echoing corridors. "You'll have privacy, but you're to remain on call. Mr. Thorne's rooms are adjacent." The suite was larger than any apartment I could have afforded. It was beautiful, sterile, and felt like a luxurious prison. Margaret handed me a key card, a pager, and a final piece of advice. "He will test you immediately. Don't take it personally." She left me in the echoing silence of the suite. I set down my one suitcase and walked to the adjoining door, the one that led to Elias Thorne. It felt like a gateway. I knocked twice, and when there was no answer, I entered. The room was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the setting sun, bathing a minimalist landscape of black and gray furniture and golden light. On the walls hung original modern art, including what looked like a genuine Rothko. It was a space that screamed wealth, but also profound, suffocating isolation. Elias Thorne sat in his wheelchair with his back to me, staring out the window. His shoulders were rigid under a black cashmere sweater. Even from behind, his presence crackled with a tension that made the air feel thin. Before I could speak, he did, his voice smooth but laced with venom. "Another one?" Margaret must be getting desperate, scraping the bottom of the barrel now. The casual cruelty should have stung, but after the last week, my skin had thickened. I walked further into the room, my footsteps deliberate on the polished hardwood. I'm Alina Petrov, your new nurse. He spun the wheelchair around with a startling speed, and I understood instantly why the other nurses had fled. Elias Thorne was dangerously handsome, with dark, unruly hair, a chiseled jaw, and eyes the color of a gathering storm. But his expression twisted that beauty into a weapon. "Tell me," he said, his voice cultured and sharp, "what personal catastrophe sent you running here? A messy divorce? A death in the family? Financial ruin? Or are you just one of those noble saviors who thinks tending to the broken will fix your own empty life?" "My fiancé left me for Isabel Davenport 3 weeks before our wedding," I said, my voice flat and factual. "So yes, I'm here because I have nowhere else to go, but I'm also here because I'm excellent at my job. And frankly, Mr. Thorne, your bitterness doesn't scare me." Something flickered in his stormy eyes. Surprise, maybe even a sliver of respect. He studied me, and I refused to look away. "Isabel Davenport," he repeated slowly. "Richard Davenport's daughter. The pharmaceutical princess, the very same. And what are you after? Revenge? A chance to steal my medication? Or just a place to hide from the humiliation?" "I'm here to work," I stated, pulling out my tablet to review his chart. "Your emotional state is not my concern, unless it interferes with your medical care." He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "My emotional state? How very clinical. Did you learn that in nursing school, or did you pick it up from whatever man decided you weren't worth the trouble?" The words were meant to wound, and a month ago, they would have. But Julian had already cauterized that part of me. "Your chart indicates you're due for evening medications in an hour. I'll need to conduct a full assessment first. Vitals, range of motion, skin integrity. I refuse. That's your prerogative. I'll simply document your non-compliance, then you'll leave. They all leave." He wheeled himself closer, close enough that I could see the deep lines of exhaustion and pain etched around his eyes. "I'll give you 3 days. That's my bet. You'll last 3 days before you run screaming." "Your last nurse made it 6 days, according to your file," I replied, not looking up from the tablet. "She started crying on day 2. I finally met his gaze. I don't cry anymore. That particular reflex has been trained out of me. Our first examination was a silent war. He fought me on everything, but I had spent 5 years in trauma care. I dealt with arrogant surgeons who tested nurses for sport. I met his every challenge with unshakable calm. "Your blood pressure is elevated," I noted, removing the cuff. "What's your pain level? Irrelevant. I'll document it as severe then. You don't get to assume anything." "Untreated pain impedes recovery, Mr. Thorne," I said softly. "Silent suffering is still suffering." He fell silent at that, watching me with an unreadable expression. As I prepared his medications, he finally spoke. "You're not crying yet, that's a first." That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the mansion was a living thing, pressing in on me at 2 a.m. Hemmead I gave up and decided to explore, to map out the geography of my new prison. I was walking down a long hallway in the East Wing when I heard it, a sound that shouldn't exist. The scrape of metal, a grunt of extreme exertion, the sound of labored breathing. It came from behind a door marked "Private." I pushed it open. The room was a state-of-the-art gym, filled with advanced rehabilitation equipment, and there, between a set of parallel bars, stood Elias Thorne. He was standing. His arms shook violently, sweat drenching his t-shirt, but his legs, his supposedly paralyzed legs, were bearing his full weight. He took one agonizing, shuffling step, and then another, his face a mask of pain and ferocious determination. He sensed me before I could back away. His head snapped up, and the fury in his eyes was volcanic. "Get out," he snarled. "Get out now." But I recognized that rage. It was the desperate need to control your own narrative, the same feeling I'd had while packing my life into boxes. This wasn't about me seeing him walk. This was about him being seen at all. "How long?" I asked softly. "How long have you been hiding this? Leave." "No, I'll have security throw you out. Your medical files state complete paralysis from T6 down, but you're bearing weight. You're taking steps." He collapsed back into his wheelchair, his chest heaving. "My medical files say what I want them to say. Why hide it? This is incredible progress." His laugh was a bitter, broken sound, because the moment people know there's hope, they expect a miracle, a full recovery. And when that doesn't happen, when progress stalls, when you have a bad day, they leave. His voice dropped, filled with a pain that had nothing to do with his spine. "Everyone leaves." The words hung in the air of that pre-dawn gym, just as I was about to tell him I understood, that I knew the unique hollowness of abandonment. The sound of multiple cars crunching on the gravel driveway shattered the moment. Elias's expression hardened, shifting from vulnerable to granite. "Get my chair. Position it by the window," he commanded, all trace of our connection gone. "And you need to disappear. Now, use the service hallway." Through a small window in the gym, I saw a convoy of black sedans. The lead car's vanity plate sent a chill down my spine. DVNPRT1. "That's Richard Davenport's car," I breathed. Elias was already in his chair, pulling a blanket over his legs, erasing any evidence of the man who had just been standing. "He's early. The meeting wasn't until 9. He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "You know him. His daughter stole my fiancé." A dangerous light flickered in Elias's eyes, but there was no time. Margaret's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mr. Thorne, your morning guests have arrived. They're requesting an immediate audience." I slipped into the service hallway as he'd ordered, but instead of returning to my suite, I found a spot where I could see into the main reception area through a crack in a service door. And what I saw made my blood run cold. Richard Davenport strode in first, followed by 2 lawyers. Then came Isabel, gliding in wearing a cream-colored suit that cost more than my annual salary. But it was the last person who entered that made my world stop. Julian. He was wearing a new Armani suit, carrying a medical briefcase, and moving with a new, swaggering confidence I had never seen before. He was playing a part I didn't recognize, or maybe this was the real him, finally on the right stage. Margaret wheeled Elias into the room. The transformation was staggering. The man who had been taking steps just minutes ago now looked utterly broken, his shoulders slumped, his expression vacant. Elias, Richard boomed with sickeningly false warmth. "You're looking... well, Richard." Elias's voice was deliberately weak. "This is a surprise." Julian stepped forward, his expression a mask of professional sympathy. "Mr. Thorne, I'm Dr. Julian Vance. I've been consulting on your case for the Davenport Medical Division. Your progress reports have been interesting." I watched through the crack as Elias shook Julian's hand, the same hand that had once worn my ring. Elias's other hand, hidden beneath the blanket, clenched into a fist. "I wasn't aware my medical records were being shared," Elias said. "The Davenport Foundation has a vested interest in spinal cord injury research," Julian replied smoothly. "Your case, with the right resources, could help thousands." "Let's cut the crap," Richard said, sinking into Elias's favorite chair. "You have proprietary technology that could revolutionize this field. We have the infrastructure to bring it to market. Your condition makes active leadership a challenge." "My condition doesn't impact my intellectual property rights," Elias countered. Isabel laughed, that tinkling, awful laugh. "Of course not, but it does affect your ability to implement it. Daddy's offer is generous, considering." "Considering what?" Margaret asked. "Considering that Mr. Thorne's recovery has plateaued," Julian interjected, pulling out files that were pure fiction. According to my analysis, the paralysis is permanent. There is no potential for motor function to return below the T6 vertebra. The board needs to question whether someone in this state can effectively lead a major tech company. Every word was a lie, a calculated, despicable lie. I saw Elias's eyes find mine through a pass-through window to the kitchen. He knew. He knew I'd heard everything. Richard slid a stack of contracts onto the coffee table. The terms are simple. We acquire your patents for $15 million, a fair price, given your inability to develop them. You'll retain a ceremonial title, of course. Everyone wins. $15 million for technology worth 10 times that? Elias observed. Worth that in the right hands, Richard corrected. Your hands, unfortunately, aren't what they used to be. I retreated to the kitchen, my nursing instincts taking over. I would serve them coffee, I would listen. I entered the room with the silver tray. Julian didn't even look at me. I was furniture. Your coffee, Mr. Davenport, I said, my voice perfectly neutral. From the kitchen, I watched the rest unfold. And if I refuse? Elias asked. Richard's smile was pure ice. Then we proceed with a competency hearing. Dr. Vance's testimony regarding your permanent incapacitation would be quite compelling. The board would be forced to appoint new leadership. He then said to his lawyers, his voice low but not low enough, "He's too broken to fight, they'll side with us." My hands trembled. These people, Julian included, were trying to steal everything from Elias. Just as they had stolen everything from me, I caught Elias's eye again. This time, he held my gaze, and in the depths of his stormy eyes, I saw my own rage reflected back at me. After they left, the stench of their arrogance lingering in the air, Elias's facade shattered. He wheeled himself to his study with a violent fury. "They brought your ex-fiancé," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "to lie about my condition." "Julian has always been a good liar," I replied. "I just never saw it." Elias turned to me, his expression transformed. "Tell me everything. About him. About Isabel. Tell me when it all started." I sat across from him and laid out the whole ugly timeline. The late nights, the secret meetings, the lies. 2 months ago, Elias repeated, his mind working furiously. That's when they made their first offer. When I refused, they must have initiated Plan B, which included getting rid of me. I finished. "They orchestrated your humiliation to clear the way for this," he said, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "They used your pain as a strategic advantage." That night, as I helped him with his physical therapy, I told him everything I knew. "The timeline is a perfect match," I said. "Julian started consulting for them right when he began pulling away from me. Every lie he told me was to cover for this. He's been feeding them my medical data for months," Elias whispered, his hands stilling on my wrists. "They think you're weak," I said. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." His response was quiet but lethal. "Then they've forgotten who I was, and they have no idea who you are." His study became our war room. Margaret, it turned out, was fiercely loyal to Elias and gave us access to security codes and back-end servers. I found the emails, 4 months of them between Julian and Isabel, predating his plot to destroy me. One email, dated 2 weeks before he ended our engagement, contained the subject line, "Obstacle removal." My entire life reduced to an obstacle. Elias, meanwhile, uncovered a web of shell companies and offshore accounts, all set up to launder his stolen patents. But the most damning discovery was an encrypted memo from Richard to his legal team. "The crippled genius is ripe for the picking. His nurse seems compliant. No complications anticipated." "Compliant," I said, the word tasting like poison. "They have no idea," Elias replied, and when our fingers brushed as we reached for the same file, neither of us pulled away. 2 weeks before the board meeting, everything shifted. During a 4 a.m. training session, Elias took 20 consecutive steps, using only a single cane for support. The raw triumph on his face broke something open inside me, and for the first time since Julian's betrayal, I cried. Not tears of sadness, but of fierce, defiant joy. He caught my hand, his thumb brushing against my knuckles. "We're going to destroy them," he said, but the way he looked at me suggested it was about more than just revenge. The next day, Clara Monroe, a legendary corporate lawyer, arrived with her team. She spread documents across the dining room table like a general planning a battle. Dr. Vance violated HEPA at least 6 times, she noted. Isabel's stock trades constitute clear insider trading, and Richard, this is so blatant it's almost insulting. "Can we prove intent?" I asked. Clara smiled. "With what you two have gathered, I can prove intent, conspiracy, and attempted corporate homicide, metaphorically speaking." When she asked about my role, Elias answered for me. "She's my partner in this." The word hung in the air. We spent the next days rehearsing. Elias practiced his entrance into the boardroom over and over. I played the role of skeptical board members, throwing objections at him. On the 10th walkthrough, he stumbled. I caught him, our faces inches apart. "You won't be there to catch me then," he said softly. "Yes, I will," I replied, and we both knew I meant more than just physically. The night before the meeting, I found him on his private terrace, standing at the railing without his cane, looking out over the city. "Are you ready?" I asked. "I've been ready since the day they decided I was finished," he said, turning to me. "The real question is, are you ready to face him?" "I'm ready." "Tell me something," he said. "Why didn't you run that first night when you saw me walking?" "Because I recognized the look in your eyes," I said. It was the same look I had when I was packing my life into boxes. We were both pretending to be broken so no one would see how strong we really were. And now, I said, we stopped pretending. He told me about the accident, the darkness, and how my refusal to treat him with pity had reawakened something inside him. I told him about my life in foster care, about the walls I'd built, and how I'd thought Julian was my chance to finally belong. "You belong here," he said, and then he kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of quiet understanding, a kiss that tasted like redemption. The air outside Thorne Industries headquarters was electric. Elias stepped out of the car, his mahogany cane striking the pavement with a sharp, definitive click. "Ready?" I asked, holding the portfolio of evidence. "I've been ready for months," he replied. "Stay close. I want them to see you with me." The elevator ride was silent. When the doors to the executive floor opened, the receptionist gasped. She'd been told to expect a broken man in a wheelchair. Instead, Elias strode past her, each step a declaration of war. The boardroom doors were open. Richard Davenport sat at the head of the table, in Elias's chair. Isabel was beside him, and to her left sat Julian, his medical files arranged neatly in front of him. The collective intake of breath was audible as Elias walked in. Richard's face went white, Isabel's composure shattered, but it was Julian's reaction that I savored. He half rose from his chair, as if to flee, before collapsing back down. Elias walked the entire length of the room, letting them absorb every impossible step. When he reached his chair, he remained standing. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding my capacity." He looked directly at Julian, who visibly shrank. I placed the portfolio on the table with a loud thud. "You're walking," Richard stammered. An astute observation," Elias replied, lowering himself into his chair. "Though according to Dr. Vance's official assessment, this should be impossible. Isn't that right, Doctor?" Julian's mouth opened and closed. "The reports, your paralysis, was documented by you," Elias interrupted. "Based on confidential medical data you were never authorized to access." He opened the portfolio. "Shall we start with your emails to Ms. Davenport? They predate your official consultation by 2 months." He read them aloud. "The affair, the plot, My name. Obstacle removal. Isabel was trembling. This proves nothing. Richard blustered. No? Elias pulled out the next file. Then let's discuss the shell companies you prepared in the Cayman Islands, or your stock trades, which coincidentally align with Dr. Vance's fraudulent reports. Clara Monroe stood. What Mr. Thorne is presenting is evidence of conspiracy, corporate espionage, and multiple federal crimes. You can't prove intent, Richard yelled. Elias just smiled. He tapped his tablet, and Richard's own voice filled the silent room. He's too broken to fight back. The crippled genius is ripe for the picking. The entire conversation from that morning, recorded by the security system they'd dismissed. That's illegal, Isabel cried. Not in my own home when it captures a criminal conspiracy, Elias replied smoothly. It was my turn. Julian finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. Alina, you don't understand. I stood slowly. I understand perfectly, Julian. You violated your oath, you betrayed your patient, and you threw away our life to climb into bed, professionally and literally with the Davenports. You traded me for an alliance that is now worthless. How does it feel, I asked, my voice cold and steady, to be the one who's been abandoned? This is ridiculous, Richard said, standing. We're leaving. Sit down, Elias commanded, and he did. Clara. Clara stepped forward. Mr. Davenport, you have two options. One, you sign away all claims, resign from every board, and disappear. Two, we proceed with criminal charges. The FBI has already been briefed. One by one, they signed. Their empire crumbled with the scratch of a pen. As they filed out, defeated, Julian paused at the door. This isn't over, he whispered. I met his gaze one last time. Yes, it is, Julian. You ended it. I'm just returning the favor. The door clicked shut. The aftermath was not hollow, but clean. Elias's hand found mine under the table. Gentlemen, ladies, he said to the stunned board, I believe we have a company to rebuild. Later, in his office, he unrolled a set of architectural plans. The entire east wing of the estate, I want to turn it into something that matters, he said. The plans showed a world-class rehabilitation center, and at the top, a name that made me stop breathing. The Thorne Petroff Rehabilitation Center. Your technology, I whispered. I want to make it available to everyone, he said. But I need someone to run it. Someone who understands that recovery isn't just physical. He slid a small velvet box across the desk. Inside wasn't a ring, but a single silver key. Full partnership, he said. Your name on the door beside mine. Elias, I'm just a nurse. You're the only one who saw me when I was invisible, he said, his voice fierce. You stayed. That's the only qualification I care about. Yes, I said. His smile transformed his entire face. 6 months later, I stood beside Elias at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Mrs. Gable, our new head of patient advocacy, was beaming in the front row. This center, Elias said to the crowd, represents the belief that our worst moments do not define us. His hand found mine as we cut the ribbon. The morning paper had a small notice about Julian and Isabel's quiet courthouse wedding. After the Davenport fortune was wiped out by legal fees, I felt nothing. Our first patient was a 22-year-old girl named Jamie. Watching Elias work with her, I saw the man he was always meant to be. 3 weeks later, on a walk along the beach, Elias stopped. He pulled out a small box. I'm not asking you to marry me because I need you, he said, opening it to reveal a simple sapphire ring. I'm asking because the best revenge is building a life they can't even imagine. Build it with me, Alina. I slid the ring on my own finger. A month later, I watched Elias help Jamie take her first unassisted steps. Her family was weeping with joy. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was Julian. I made a mistake. I deleted it without reading the rest and took Elias's hand. We had both been broken by people who saw us as disposable, but from the wreckage, we had built something indestructible. A love forged in revenge, but reforged into something far greater, a purpose. End of story.